Hi there and welcome from Ventura, California to today's webinar, sponsored by vAuto and hosted by WebAttract, the leader in educational webinars. I'm Lori Dearman, Senior Webinar Producer with WebAttract, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. And in just a moment, we'll be introducing Majd Saboura, a specialist in the wholesale sourcing market, for an interactive webinar to help you turn sourcing auction vehicles into a competitive advantage. You'll also have an opportunity to have your questions answered at the end of the presentation during the Ask the Expert panel session at the end of today's webinar. Today we've invited you along with a diverse audience of over 200 professionals registered across 31 states and provinces. Now before today's webinar, we asked each of you to tell us a bit about what you'd like to learn, and many of you took the time to weigh in. Thank you so much for your input, and I think that you'll find today's speaker will address the majority of your requests throughout the program. Now, today you'll walk away with best practice insights to help you reduce the time you invest to find and purchase auction vehicles, improve your bid-to-buy ratio in the lane and online, acquire more of the right vehicles for your dealership and retail profit sales objectives, and minimize costly auction purchase mistakes. I would like to kick us off with the first of our interactive polls for today. So folks, coming up on your screen is that question. How has your auction sourcing process changed in the last 12 to 18 months? And if you wouldn't mind weighing in with one of these options, we're going to more auctions than we used to. We're buying a few more cars online than we used to. We don't go to physical auctions, we only buy online. Or our process really hasn't changed. Looks like 15% saying going to more auctions, 33% buying a few more cars online than we used to, 20% we don't go to physical auctions, we only buy online, and 33% saying our process really hasn't changed. So thank you so much for your input, and I'd like to go ahead and bring on our speaker for today. So without further ado, let me introduce our speaker, a 9-year veteran of the automotive industry. Majd specializes in the wholesale market where he has worked nationally as well as internationally, connecting buyers and sellers on behalf of Manheim. Now in his current role with vAuto, Majd leads wholesale business development for Stockwave, vAuto's wholesale sourcing innovation. Prior to Cox Automotive, Majd held international finance and revenue management positions for Manhattan Associates and Invesco. Majd earned a bachelor's degree in accounting from Kennesaw State University, and he and his family currently live in Atlanta. So Majd, welcome. How are you doing today?
Great. Thank you, Lori. I appreciate the introduction.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you, and perhaps you could get us started by telling us a little bit about yourself and your role at vAuto.
Definitely I'd love to do that. So just a little bit more deeper background. I have spent over 10 years in the automotive industry, really through different roles, starting off in the consumer side of the events, looking at dealership transactions or car purchasing transactions from a consumer side, trying to understand their behavior and what they do and how they approach the whole car buying process, which transitioned more into the actual dealership side of things, where I spent a lot of time in dealerships trying to understand that process as well, working all the way from the sales desk all the back to the service and everything in between. So that really gave me a nice, good background about the whole aspect of things. And the whole idea from my perspective was to figure out how to bridge the gap between consumers and dealers in order to make the process more pleasing for consumers and easier and faster for dealers. The past couple of years I've also spent really trying to understand the wholesale market in the United States, because my mission was to try to open up the U.S. market, or U.S. and Canada market of used cars, and expose them to the rest of the world. And really it's trying to find if there was a market for used cars in Asia, in Europe, in the Middle East, and Africa. So doing that has really given me a lot of time and exposure into the wholesale market here in the United States, understanding how it works, which I really feel has set me up properly to where I am today, where I'm really working with wholesale buyers every single day, trying to help them streamline their process, understand the implications and how they're doing it, and what is going to come for them in the future, and what are some trends in some ways that are going to impact their performance where they are today. But really, the best part of my whole job, honestly, is talking with dealers every single day and truly learning from them to try to understand what they do, how they do it, and also understanding what are some of the pain points that they encounter through the whole process, and try to understand what are some of the challenges that they're facing today. And the biggest thing that I've come to understand from these dealers is really they're telling me is that they're getting out of the gate strong is the utmost importance. So it's really getting the car right, or buying the car right in the first place is the most important part of the equation, which basically makes everything else afterwards successful. So they're spending a lot of time, a lot of hours trying to truly find that right car that fits their profile and that they believe truly they're going to make them the most amount of profit from the transaction. So they're not surprising, to be honest with you, that some of your behavior earlier in the poll has changed a little bit. Over 70%, or 67% of you guys have changed or have adapted to change your way that you approach the wholesale market, and about 33% of you guys have just still haven't changed their process yet. Maybe it's working well, maybe it's an opportunity to explore different changes. But really what I get from that, and I also believe that you guys will agree as well, is answering the three most important questions, and really understanding that dealers are relying on these three criteria to make sure that they're acquiring the car right. And really is trying to understand what car to buy that they know that can make them the most profit when they sell it, and then once they figure out what car to go get, then they have to find that vehicle. So they're looking everywhere for that vehicle potentially, or they're looking only locally in their market, and if they don't find that vehicle, then they're not able to maximize their profits. And then once they solve those first two questions, it comes down to what to pay for that vehicle. And I've come to learn that most dealers today are using different methodologies and different ways to truly answer these three questions. Some of them are relying on their past experiences, what they've learned in the market previously, what they've been able to pick up from from whoever brought them up in the car industry. They're relying basically on their old habits, some of the things that they've been doing that has been successful for them in the past. And they seem to tend to go back to that same process over and over again. And they're also, potentially they're having time constraints because they feel like they have to go and get something because they need a spot to fill on their lots. So they're just relying on whole different methodologies, and there's not truly one common theme that I've been able to decipher. But one thing that I've been able to identify, and this really one problem that they all seem to have, from what I could tell, and it's really is lacking a solid game plan. It's really understanding what are their game plan, how they're approaching the market before they go out. What are they doing to understand what the market is, what the market can bear, and truly understanding what to do when they go out there. So it's really understanding sort of like a football team. They're not really analyzing their opponents as best as they can. They're not watching video reels. They're not really having a true game plan of plays that they're going to go and follow when they hit the market. And so it's really not understanding how much to pay and what is selling in the market, and those things are really impacting how they're buying the cars right, or vehicles right. But before we get into a game plan and really what constitutes a good game plan, I would really like to step back a little bit and take a look at what's going on in the wholesale market today, and what are some of the experts are telling us that's going to happen in the future. So we know that in 2015 that the wholesale market has been on the rise over the past years, and as well as has not reached its peak. So in 2015 there were about 9.3 million vehicles sold in the wholesale markets, and those are that's reported by the NAAA, which is the National Automotive Association, from their auction houses that have reported these numbers. So we know that not all cars that are presented for sale in a wholesale market are sold. So if they sold about 9.3 million, they had to at least be 15 million vehicles in the market. But the most important trend that I want to show here is that if you look back at the graph, we haven't seen volumes that high since 2003. So the market is becoming really, really complex, and you're going to have tons of vehicles coming back into the market that have come in the market in the past and are continuing to come in the market over the next couple of years as well. And one of the biggest reasons that's driving that increase is new car leases. This is the trend that we've seen over the past 8 months, and analysts are continuing to predict that the year will end over 30% of penetration. So it had some softness in the early summer months, but now it's picking back up again and is averaging in the 30s still. So at least new car lease penetrations have been really, really high. And mostly because consumers are really focused on their car payments. They can't really afford a brand new car because on average a brand new car is about $35,000 to $34,000, which is fairly expensive for the consumers. And as you know, they're all focused on their car payment. So all these new lease programs are very attractive for these consumers. So they're going towards a new car, but they're really still focused on their payments. So they're choosing to lease the vehicle. But we know that these vehicles in the next 24 to 36 months are going to come back into the market, as well as it's going to be a challenge for the originating dealer to consume all these leases, to consume these leases and take them back on their lots as used cars. So these leases returns are going to come back in the wholesale market. So they're going to be available for dealers, the vehicles that have never been available before. And so if we look at the prediction of what that volume would look like over the next 3 years, we're seeing that it's going to continue to increase to about 3.1 million new off-lease vehicles coming back into the market in 2016. We've seen so far 3.6 in 17 and all the way up to about 4 million in 2018. So that is going to just continue. So that number we've seen in 9.3 million sold, that's going to continue to rise, which will continue to offer a challenge for dealers today to truly understand which cars to look for and which cars make sense versus which cars they should stay away from. So really, if you look at analysts and what they're predicting and what we're seeing so far, is that you would think with all this increased supply coming into the market that prices will soften and we'll see cars cheaper than ever. But unfortunately, we haven't seen any deep discounts in used car markets in the wholesale market. We've seen about 3 to 4% decline, but that's in specific categories and not necessarily across the board. So it's recognizing that there is a decline, but it's not as deep as we've expected or basic economics will tell us. So where is that discount going to come, or is it going to ever come? So it really makes us to step back and ask the question whether this is the new norm that we're going to see in the market today, that where wholesale prices overall don't really move that much, even as supply changes occur. And volatility, we'll see some price volatility hit certain segments of the vehicles in the market, the wholesale market, but it's not necessarily going to be across the board. So it seems like there's a reasonable conclusion, and it really makes us, ask the question, why? And we can say that's interesting, so now we have to be careful with the vehicles coming back in the wholesale market. We're not going to expect that much of a decline in pricing, but we also have to look a little bit to answer that question. I think we have to look at the retail market a little bit to understand what has been going on that side to truly answer that question. So if we step back and take a look what's going on in the retail market, we'll notice that it's still strong for both franchise and independent dealers. And if you're a franchise dealer, you're definitely seeing some good CPO. You have a good CPO program that you're leveraging, and you're actually being able to sell a lot of more CPO vehicles. And every single month I look at the CPO numbers, and they continue to break records. And if you look at the trend over the past 3 quarters, and this is the most recent numbers, there are almost 670,000 vehicles are sold through CPO. So again, consumers are really focused on car payment, and some of these consumers are choosing not to take advantage of the leases because they feel like they want to own a vehicle, but again, they can't afford a brand new vehicle, so they're looking at CPO vehicles as an alternative, which is very, very attractive because they're still payment focused, and they feel confident that the dealer is going to provide them with the same warranty, or the CPO car is going to give them the same warranty as a used car, as a brand new car. So they're finding that a lot very attractive, and they're moving towards that. And I believe the prediction for the rest of the year is that going to continue to break records all this year. So what this proves to us as well is that now independent dealers are doing better as buyers, are looking for monthly payments, because these independent dealers now have access to these newer, younger vehicles that they never had before. Again, because franchise dealers are not really able to consume all these new vehicles, so they're sending them back to the wholesale market. So the consumers are actually enjoying the availability of newer cars with lower mileage that they can find attractive and affordable. But we're also learning that used car leasing is popping up now, and that's creating an opportunity since we have all these younger, newer vehicles in the market. So financial institutions and dealers and OEMs are becoming more creative in how they can be able to capitalize on the market. So we're seeing a lot of new programs are coming on that is creating an opportunity for dealers everywhere. The other thing that we're noticing from the retail market is that dealers are now stocking newer vehicles than ever before. If you look at the mix in Q3 2016, it's the highest that we have seen ever, and it's about 60% 3 years and under vehicles are stocking on their lots as part of the used inventory versus the older vehicles over 3 years. And two reasons, again, one of them is that it's availability of the market. There's tons of newer, younger vehicles available in the market today, and again, these off-lease vehicles are coming back into the dealer community, that their dealers are having to stock this inventory, and as well as there's not available. Older vehicles are not available in the market as much. Trade-ins are lower. The dealers are having a harder time finding these older vehicles to be able to stock them on their lots. So it's a strategy in the current market, but it is going to limit the dealer's ability to be able to attract a wider customer base than they ever have before. And the piece to kind of top it all off, I would say, is the cherry on top with all this that we've seen so far, is that even though there's increased supply, there's newer, younger vehicles in the market, consumers are buying, confidence and consumer confidence is higher than ever. Consumer spending is very healthy, but unfortunately, margins are lower and lower every single year. And the NADA published a study that over the past 5 years there has been a 20% compression in margins from front-end growth for dealers today. And what this graph shows you, this is the margins that have been declared, that have been published by the top 7 dealer groups that are publicly traded. And you can see as well, and they are seeing a compression in their margins over the past years. And I believe some of you guys as well have been experiencing a similar trend. So increase in supply, all these things that we're seeing from the market really kind of sums it up to us to saying that there's increased competition out there for finding the right vehicle. What I mean is that there's tons of cars out there today in the market. But there's continued competition to try to minimize our risk from a dealer community perspective, from a wholesale perspective, and be able to find the right vehicle, as well as trying to not only to find the right vehicle, but you want to find the vehicle that's going to maximize your gross to make sure that you're making the most front-end gross as possible, because as you can see, there is definitely compression in the margin. So if I had to summarize 2 major things that I have seen so far, or 2 major complaints that I hear from dealers today that are basically saying it's really hard to find the right vehicle. And I talk to I talk to dealers, and they're telling me they're spending hours on hours just sifting through run lists, trying to identify which cars they want to go and take a look at auctions, or basically run some history reports on to try to understand if those are the right vehicles. And I remember one dealer was telling us a story that he would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday morning before his family would get up to go through the run list to prepare for auction for the next week, and he spent hours just trying to sift through everything, and then the family would wake up and he would shut down, go spend the day with the family, do whatever he has to do on a Saturday, and then come back later on during the day or at nighttime, boot up the computer again and go through that list and do it all over again on Sunday. So spending hours just sifting through vehicles because there's so many of them out there, and comparing them side by side to understand which one makes sense for his dealership. Is that a vehicle he wants to put in his buy list to go and try to get the next week? Just endless and endless hours, exhausting trying to understand it. And then, as an independent dealer told me once in Texas, has shared this anecdote, he's saying, buying cars at auction is really a form of legalized gambling, and the dealers who are best at working the numbers will always win. So with the wholesale market, with the wholesale supply increasing, and you keep asking, kind of ask your question, why is it harder and harder to find the right vehicle at the right prices? And I think the part of the question is answered is that it's the number of vehicles that need to be evaluated. Just the increase in supply is going to make it even more challenging to be able to eliminate the noise and just focus in on the vehicles that make sense for the dealership. Not only make sense for the dealership, but also make sense from a money perspective. And really understanding how many vehicles you need to pursue or how many vehicles you need to look at to be sort of a ratio of how many vehicles you need to understand and investigate, and knowing what your win ratio is to be able to say, I have to look at 100 vehicles to be able to buy 1 or 2 vehicles. And then understanding what your bid limit is, understanding when to walk away or instead of getting stuck with a vehicle that you purchased at auction because you felt obligated. And unfortunately, some of the price softness that we're going to see in the wholesale market, or we've seen, even though it's low from 3 to 4%, it is going to make it tempting for some dealers to be able to bid on the wrong car because they're just relying on instinct or their past experiences, and they know that these vehicles in the past have made them money, and they know these vehicles are well, and they're cheaper than ever before, so they're going to buy them, not knowing that these vehicles might sit there and get aged on their lots, but sit there for over 60, 70, 90 days potentially. So consumers are willing more than ever to pay premium for used cars, but acquisition costs are not declining. So again, the question is this the new norm? Is this the new way that we're facing in the market? So at this point, I'd like to hand it back to Lori to ask another quick question.
All right, thanks, Maj. And coming up on your screen is that second poll question, and we'd like to hear from you. Which of the following matters most when you evaluate auction vehicles? Is it wholesale book values, retail asking prices, market days supply, cost market, or perhaps something else? So seeing 21% saying wholesale book values, 26% retail asking prices, 36%, our front runner here, market days supply, 17% saying cost to market. Maj, any thoughts on these responses?
That's actually very good to see the concentration for market day supply as well as retail asking prices. And I'm going to get a little bit more into these as we compare the Look Smarter and Look Harder dealer profiles, which is actually leads us into the next slide. So I will add some commentary for these in a minute.
All right, then, back to you.
Thank you. So to kind of help frame up the challenges that I'm seeing today, or some of the behaviors to what auction sourcing is going to look like in the future, I like to categorize the two into 2 profiles, and that's really a Look Harder dealer and a Look Smarter dealer. And I would like to take a moment to truly go through each profile and try to show you some of the characteristics and best practices of each. So a Look Harder dealer really are dealers that are going to, as I mentioned earlier, are going to leverage their instinct. They're really going to look back at their past experiences and what they've seen in the market before, what they truly feel like is like the meat of who they are and what they have done, and they're really going to depend on that. They're going to use very, very little resources to take a look at as far as valuations, to try to understand what's really going on in the market. They're really relying more on wholesale book values, and try to understand what the past has told them as far as what the average value of these vehicles are in the market, and that's how they're going to start to try to frame how much they're going to pay for these vehicles. They're really folks that are not leveraging much technology, not leveraging much metrics out there, or looking at what the industry is telling them as far as what's happening and what's going on in the future, and they're really focused on what they've known in the past. They're not really looking at market day supply. They're not understanding what scarcity reports are. They're not understanding what consumers are looking for in their markets to make sure that they're stocking the right inventory. They're just going out there and buying what they used to buy, what they bought last month, last year, and so forth. And they're really focused on their purchase in a local market. So they're really going to 1 or 2 auctions, potentially maybe 2, no more than that. And they're really going to the same auction they've always visited every single week, and they're going back there and they're seeing what kind of cars are coming through. And if they don't see the cars that they want, then they're really just relying on the market saying, well, I couldn't find any cars this week, so I'm not going to buy anything, or I'm just going to buy something that I just feel like I have to get something because there's nothing else in the market. So they're not really looking for a change. They're about, 28% of the population that I've seen so far. They're really a little smaller. They're not stocking that much inventory, and the numbers are really influenced as in regards of what they're buying by the sense of urgency. Again, they feel like they've sold 4 vehicles. They need to go back and replace them with whatever they have. So they're really, whatever the market has for them today, they're buying and they're bringing it back. So they're really potentially overpaying for some of these vehicles because they're not really trying to understanding that they need, and they're just having to settle. They feel like they need to come with something. And what they're doing is that they are spending a lot more time looking at these vehicles. They're going the day before the auction, they're on the pre-sale, they're walking the lots, trying to look at these vehicles, they have their paint meters in hand, and they're really looking at these vehicles, trying to identify which ones they want to come back on the next day and try to bid on, or try to even go back and look at what book values are to see if they to kind of understand a little bit what they want to pay for the next day, or they're making that they're making that evaluation right on the spot. They're not really spending much time understanding what the market is really bearing, and they're really getting a little frustrated because they just feel like they need something. They're not finding the right vehicles, or they're sitting in the lanes. They're getting outbid. They're not quite sure where they're getting outbid because book value is saying this, but somebody else is willing to pay more for these vehicles. So they're just shaking their heads and saying, "I just don't understand it." And they're just frustrated, so they're going back empty-handed potentially, saying I couldn't find anything, so they're losing out on a potential sale because they don't have the right inventory, or they're just settling for a car and they're getting it, and I mentioned earlier, and that vehicle's getting aged on their lots. And we know that a wholesale vehicle that if purchased through a wholesale market, anything over 30 days or 45 days, it's going to really lose a lot of the gross that it has in it, and it's going to lose its value. So it's very difficult, it's very frustrating. And they're basically the hardest part is really overpaying for some of these vehicles because they feel the pressure of buying something. So they feel like they have to go like 400, 500 over book value, or even 1,000 over book value just to get something, to feel like they're able to win something. On the flip side, what a Look Smarter dealer is doing, they're really leveraging the tools and technology that they have in place. And what I mean by that, they're really leveraging the tools and technology to try to create some criteria that are important to them, that basically eliminates all the noise or all these excess vehicles that are coming through the market, as I mentioned, and they're really focusing in on a certain amount that makes sense from them. So they're eliminating thousands of vehicles just by click of a button or 2 clicks of a button, and really narrowing the population down to a certain manageable set of vehicles that they can really truly look down at it and try to investigate deeper. And what I mean by, so they're spending less time just eliminating and researching vehicles, and really are spending more time buying because they know exactly which vehicles they want. They know which vehicles make sense for them, and they're taking the next step of understanding the condition of the vehicle. So it's basically sort of is playing the numbers. It's really understanding if the numbers make sense first. Then they're going to go the next step to try to look at the physical condition of the vehicle to see if that makes sense even more. So they're really focused on the right vehicle. And what I mean by 85 discipline, 15% instinct, is that they are disciplined in their approach. So they're buying most of their vehicles based on, if they don't fit this criteria that they set for themselves, they're not really buying that vehicle. So they're very, very disciplined in their strategy and in their process of approaching wholesale market, which affords them an opportunity to have that instinct, to go rely back on their gut feeling, to have that vehicle that they know they can make money on this vehicle no matter what, because they know their market extremely well, or they have a specific customer that they have in mind that will be able to buy this vehicle and it'll make money. So they have about 15%, what I'm calling instinct, is that they still have fun. They're still buying that fun car to have on their lot, or basically taking an adventure or a car they've never potentially stocked before and say, you know what, I think the market will bear this, I'm going to buy this vehicle. Is that they can afford it now because they have that much discipline that they're not wasting their money. They don't feel like they're losing any money on these vehicles. And this is kind of a screen. So how do they do that? So a Look Smarter dealer really saves time by researching for this car by having a platform or a tool that really kind of curates the inventory for them. And what I mean by that is that it brings in all wholesale vehicles into one platform that they can look across every single vehicle side by side, no matter where the vehicle is available or where the vehicle is found. So they're not having to log into multiple websites, wasting more time to try to understand which filtering systems they put into this website versus that website. They're using one platform to bring in all the inventory in one place, and they can evaluate them side by side. So they're using the tools to define the vehicles they need, the profit they want, and the purchase parameters that they are looking for. So they're evaluating vehicles nationwide, not just at their local auction. They're taking a look across the whole nation, because now it is a market-based approach. I mean, it's a nationwide-based approach, not necessarily a local market. Because one of the things that we're also seeing is that these huge consigners and wholesalers are not necessarily investing in moving inventory across the nation, because it's costing them a lot of money. So they're keeping them centralized into centralized locations, but they're posting them nationwide. So if my dealer looking in my local area only, I'm potentially missing on some inventory that is available outside of my area that I will never have seen or never will see, because I'm only limiting my search. So I'm really looking at auctions across the nation. I'm potentially looking in the next state over, a couple of states over, because I understand now the total cost of transportation that is involved, and I'm potentially finding vehicles in a different state that could that is actually offering me a cheaper option. So they're really having a complete view of the national market. They're seeing the same vehicles that are local in their local market as well as everywhere else. So they're having a complete understanding of the market. What I mean by that, right, is that can they potentially find a vehicle in a different state that could potentially is actually going cheaper, because that market is cheaper. It doesn't necessarily have that vehicle, too many of them in there, that they're able to buy it somewhere out of the market cheaper and then bring it over to their local market, even with the transportation costs, and they still have a couple $1,000s in gross in that vehicle. So that's why we're seeing that a lot more vehicles are moving online versus buying vehicles in lane. And as you can see, if you remember the poll that we'd mentioned earlier, there's about over about 70% of you guys that are changing their behavior, and I would say about 50+% of you guys are out there online buying vehicles online. I'm not saying that you're doing every single purchase online. I think there has to be some sort of a mixture of 60-40, 70-30, something that works best for your dealership, because what works best for you does not necessarily work best for somebody else. So you have to find that comfort zone that works best for your dealership or for your customer base. Is it whether it's 60% online versus in lane, or 70-30 or 80-20? But I do think there has to be some mixture of both, but not necessarily one or the other. But you have to have that right balance that's really going to make that niche in the market and be able to afford you to find that vehicle with specific demands, that you have a consumer that's looking for the specific vehicle that you can't necessarily find in your local market. The most important thing, I believe, from a Look Smarter dealer is that they are definitely data-driven. They are and disciplined in their approach. And what I mean by that is that truly their overall behavior changes. It sort of becomes sort of like Moneyball, or what Billy Beane figured out for baseball, is really understanding the numbers first. Do the numbers make sense? Do the numbers are all the black and white? Is the retail market pricing availability, does it make sense for this vehicle? Do I have enough margin in this vehicle if it fits my right profile, or my right KPIs that I'm looking for to track? And then if the numbers look good, then they're taking the next step of understanding the vehicle itself. They're running a vehicle history report. They're looking at the condition report. They're trying to understand if the physical aspect of the vehicle meets their demands, because they're not spending that much time on looking at those first, because those are time consuming, as we all know. And you don't have the luxury to waste time just running vehicle history reports after vehicle history report if the numbers don't make any sense. So if you're limiting your population to black and white first and seeing if there's profit in these vehicles and then taking the next step, that is proving to be very, very profitable and actually increasing your profit. because you're shifting, like I mentioned, you're shifting your behavior. So you have specific metrics that you review for every single vehicle. You're looking at market day supply. You're looking at what's the market trends for this vehicle. What are consumers are looking for. You're looking at total cost of ownership. You're including all the fees associated with owning this vehicle, by auction fees, by transportation fees, by if you're doing a post-sale inspection, if you're deciding to get somebody else to come, a third party to come out there and take a look at the car for you, if it's out of state, to take more pictures, to do something that gives you the assurance that this vehicle is not a lemon, that you as a buyer, you want to protect yourself from this vehicle. So you're putting all of those numbers together before you even purchase that vehicle to say, does this make sense? So every single bid, every single approach to a vehicle is calculated and concrete. And then you're not worried to walk away. You're not scared to walk away. If it doesn't make sense, it's okay to say no. If the numbers are not what they are, then it's okay to walk away from this vehicle because it just doesn't make sense. And that's where the discipline comes in place, and that's where you save yourself the money that you might potentially lose because you're not going to allow that car to get aged on your lot. So it's really understanding what your max bid is for every single vehicle before you even walk into the auction or before you even walk into any wholesale transaction. So how would you do that? It's really understanding how does it look smart a dealer assess the data behind every car and determining if the vehicle has the right profit potential in a flash. Technology can provide that for you. The technology can set some certain criteria through the different technologies available out there today. You can set different parameters, and then you can apply those parameters for every single vehicle. And again, you can start searching based on those parameters. And if a vehicle does not meet those parameters or does not meet your certain profit objective, then the vehicle is eliminated from your view. So you're not wasting time looking at a car that's not going to make sense for you. That's potentially going to lose money. So you're putting in market day supply trends in place. You're already having total cost of ownership numbers right in the forefront. So you're looking at profit potential for every single vehicle. So it's really discipline coupled with more vehicles does have its rewards. A Midwest franchise dealer told me that they're seeing 25% over potentially plus or minus increase in front-end gross on vehicles they've purchased because they're applying some of this look smarter methodology that I shared with you, and it's working for them. So they've actually been able to increase their front-end gross. And not only that, they've been able to save time. I think they believe they've saved about 60-75% time efficiency. And also an independent dealer in Minneapolis reduced his costs of goods by 10% by buying cars online at auctions he'd never before considered, like Phoenix, because costs were too high closer to home. So those kind of things that now that you have numbers in play, you're not scared to go out there and look at the rest of the world and be able to optimize and capitalize on the profits and the benefits that those are providing to you. And I believe that the most important thing is for a look smarter dealer is they're having gross in mind, is that they're looking at all different data points. They're looking at what the retail market is looking for if they want to sell this vehicle, or if they want to list it in the market. They're looking to see how many vehicles are available in the market today and how many they're going to compete against. So they're looking at how much their gross potential is. They're also looking at their fixed ops, because now they're looking at, does it really make sense for me to spend this much money reconditioning this vehicle? Can the market bear it? Can I afford to spend this much money, or can I go back to my shop or to my third party if I'm outsourcing and be able to negotiate better rates because it's costing me too much money to recondition these vehicles that I would like to buy because I know the market needs. So I'm finding efficiencies in a different way, but the whole point is I'm looking at gross in mind every single transaction. I'm looking at car next to car to be able to say, does this make sense from a financial perspective as well as condition perspective? And I'm going at it, and then I'm going very laser focused in when I go in, and I have my floor and ceiling, what I like to say. So I know exactly what I can afford to buy for this vehicle or bid on this vehicle, and if somebody else is willing to pay more for this vehicle, then I'm walking away because I know I don't have the money in it, or I need to make some different cuts in my operations to be able to afford this vehicle. So the biggest complaint I continue to hear today, and I'm sure you guys have heard it, or if you guys have said it potentially yourself, is that you don't understand why people are overpaying for vehicles at auction, or you don't understand how people are able to afford to overpay for these vehicles at auctions. So my question to you comes by saying, is that are they really overpaying for these vehicles? And how are we defining overpaying? Or my question, I would say back to you, is that maybe they're understanding the total cost of ownership, they're understanding all the numbers, that they're making a sacrifice somewhere else to get this vehicle. What I mean is that it's okay for them to buy a vehicle over MMR or over value because they know that their market can afford it, or they're potentially buying this vehicle in your market and sending it to a different market for another dealership that they have, that market can really afford to pay more for those vehicles. So that's the whole point of looking at a nationwide aspect of understanding the market, because their approach is determining which car merits a deep dive, in the sense that this vehicle, I know it has the numbers in it, so I can go in there and overpay for it in this local market because I know I can make my money on it in anywhere else. And in reality, if you know you have $1,500 or $2,000 gross in this vehicle, does it really matter what the book is telling you should pay for this vehicle? Because we know those book values are really based on, are really supposed to give you it's a representation of history, and they're not necessarily telling what the market is bearing today. So they're really understanding what sacrifice they have to make for this vehicle, or they're coming into it with eyes wide open, saying, you know what, I have to overpay, or I'm gonna pay over MMR or over book value for this vehicle because I know I can bring it back, and I have a great finance office that's going to make up the difference on the back end. So they're sacrificing the front end gross because they know they can make the money on the back end. So now they're going in, and what I'm saying is that they have eyes wide open in a sense that they understand the true financial impact of this vehicle that they're purchasing, and they're going in there consciously knowing that they're going to sacrifice on one aspect because they know they can make money on the back end. Or for customer service, they know that this is a great customer that's been asking for this vehicle, and they're going to, you know what, eat it potential on the front end, make some money on the back end, not as much, but they know that this customer is going to be a lifer or a family, and that this one customer might bring 2, 3 other transactions with them that I'm willing to sacrifice on one deal to capitalize on the other. So what I mean is that you're not necessarily looking at per car profit anymore. You're looking at what does this deal mean for my business and for my market or for my dealership, and am I making money somewhere else on this transaction? So it could be, as mentioned, customer satisfaction, or there's a niche in the market. I know that this car is not available in a certain market, and I know I have a buddy of mine that can purchase this vehicle. I can do a dealer trade. You're going in from understanding the market and understanding the numbers, and you're capitalizing on the investment that you are by spending this money on this vehicle. So you're competing on a different level than any other dealer before. So it's not really overpayment anymore. It's necessarily, what am I sacrificing to get this vehicle, or what am I going to do to capitalize on this vehicle and make more money on the back end? So it's really, to summarize all that I've shared with you guys so far, and just if I think back, and if I had the ability to have a crystal ball and try to predict what the future, what 2017, what the next couple of years have in store, I can definitely tell you there's going to be more technology used in lanes and online. Technology is popping up every single day. Every day I read an article about this new technology, this company comes up that's going to help in the automotive industry, that's going to help buy cars, value cars, trade cars. Something is out there. So there's going to be definitely more technology used, whether it's in lane, whether it's online, whether it's through your trade-in, your appraisal, however you do your business, you're going to be forced, if not, because you won't be able to stay competitive and relevant in the market if you're not embracing technology and using it to your benefit rather than having it used against you. And I do think that we're going to continue to see a shift towards online than in lane. And it goes back to the actual physical aspect of these consigners and financial institutions are not really able to invest in sending cars into the auctions, and they want to be able to save money because they don't have a lot of margin in these vehicles anymore. So they're trying to save money by not taking them to auction. So there are other ways that these vehicles are popping up, and these websites are popping out every single day that have inventory available. So if you're not aware of these new sites that are popping up, or you're not able to leverage technology to find those new websites, you're going to be missing out on some deals. And I don't think the margin compression that we've seen over the past 5 years is going to get alleviated anytime soon. Consumers continue to be well educated about pricing. The internet is providing a whole different challenge for everybody across the information highway, I would say. And so consumers are really, really understanding what to pay for vehicles. So we're going to continue to see an ongoing margin compression over the next couple of years. As well as consumers are holding on to their vehicles a little longer, so they're not really trading in their vehicles as fast as they can. So it's going to create a lot more challenge to find those proper vehicles that make us the money. And I think the only way that we can be able to alleviate and help our margins is to figure out how we can become more efficient and effective in our processes, making sure that we have an efficient process of finding vehicles, of selling vehicles, of looking at our fixed operations and making sure we're capitalizing and maximizing our profits there as well. But just looking at overall transactions that we do from running a dealership and not just one aspect of it, to truly try to find efficiency and ways to make sure that we're effective in what we do. We're selling more cars faster. And I do believe that cutting time on our fixed ops or reconditioning, we can't really afford to spend 7 to 10 days after we buy a car from auction to put it back on our retail lots. We have to find efficiencies to be able to get them at least 2-3 days and have this car retail ready to be able to maximize our money and get our return on our investment much faster. So I guess I would say, after I've shared some of this information with you and I've gone through all these details, is really, what is your game plan? How are you going to change your game plan to make sure that you're relevant today and make sure that you do not only relevant today, but you do exist tomorrow, because the landscape is changing every single day and is becoming more and more challenging. So with that, I believe we are
ready for our final Q&A.
Yes.
All right. Majd, I do have a few questions here in the queue, so can go ahead and toss one out at you from Matthew, and he's asking, how specific can we make the vehicle search?
Matthew, that's actually a great question. So through these tools, you can be as granular as you would like on the vehicle search. You can put in year, make, model, trim, of course, but you can also put in mileage. You can put in condition. You can put in a range of year, make, model, condition, as well as you can put in bring in AutoCheck or Carfax parameters as well, one owner, accidents, no accidents, salvage title. You can go as granular as you would like, or you can go as high as you want. So there are abilities to be able to leverage, as well as exclusion lists, where you can say, I never want to see these vehicles from my search. I don't even want to bother with even knowing that there's a vehicle in existence if it meets these specific criteria. So it completely eliminates it, so you don't even have to see it. So it is extremely pinpointed and specific.
All right. Question here. Which would you say is more important when acquiring a vehicle? Is it market day supply or potential profit?
That's a great question. I would say potential profit comes into play first, because if there is money to be made in this vehicle, and I'm able to market and be able to be competitive in the market, I do think that I'll be able to maximize. After I say this and I'm hearing myself talk, I want to say it's got to be a balance, but I would say profit is first and then market day supply as well. The other thing with market day supply, if I know that there's a low market day supply for a certain amount of vehicle, how many other dealers are out there potentially looking at similar vehicles? So I need to be able to balance off my profit as well as my market day supply, because I could potentially buy a very low market day supply vehicle and make a couple $100s on that, so I'm not maximizing my profit. But it all comes back to my game plan. Am I doing that to stay relevant in my market, to make sure that I have the most relevant inventory and consumers are coming to my lot? Then yes, 100%, I'm going to go get the hottest vehicles, even though I might not make as much money on it. So I do believe there has to be a balance, and all's based on your game plan specifically of what you're trying to accomplish. Is it a short-term win? Is it a long-term win? I hope that makes sense.
All right. Sure, next question here for you, Majd. This one coming from Jerry. What market segments do you think offer the greatest opportunity in the months ahead?
That's a good question. I say if a dealer is looking to expand their sales volumes, they might want to look beyond the near new or the CPO friendly model years. I think, as I mentioned, as you've been seen in the slide, dealers are really stocking 3 years and younger vehicles on their lots. So I think it's the harder to find units that are really going to make the most money in the long run, and these are really been harder to find. So a dealer needs to be very, very specific and be able to leverage technology to be able to go pinpoint those 6 to 8 year old vehicles that are in good shape and be able to bring them to their inventory, and that's how they can potentially compete and be able to make a lot more money and be able to attract a different kind of consumer that potentially might not have as good credit as they did, or they're diversifying in what kind of consumer they're attracting to their lot today.
All right, next question here. How can I hold my buyers accountable to acquiring vehicles that meet my retail gross objective?
I think that it really comes back again to the game plan. Is that do you currently have a specific cost to market or any other KPIs in place that you're measuring your buyers, or do you give them certain guidelines that they can follow to saying these are the certain, you have to stay within these parameters when you're looking at these vehicles and bringing them back to your lot? So as well as, do you have an inventory tool that really tells you on an individual appraiser or buyer basis how well they're acquiring the auction vehicles that fit your parameters? So if you set these KPIs and measurements, how are you measuring against those when the buyer actually comes back with a vehicle? Do you go back and investigate? Do you have like a scorecard that you track every single vehicle that these buyers are buying for you? It's really, the overall is the key is to have a way to check what you want, what you tell them to do. So how do you go back and basically the cliche, that's not the cliche, but the saying that says inspect what you expect, really is if you expect your buyers to follow these parameters and you told them what to do, how are you going back and scoring them and measuring them, making sure that they are doing it? If you're not doing that, if that's not part of your game plan, if that's not part of your ongoing efficiency of how you measure your performance, then I think it's fair to say that you can't really measure them, or you can't hold them accountable, so you have to show them that you are tracking it. And unfortunately, a lot of these dealers today, they don't. They just trust their buyers to go buy the vehicles, and then when they go back to say, you bought this vehicle, you spent X on it, did we retail it at Y, did we spend as much money on the recon and the shop on it as we said we were, and so forth. So don't go back and look in the back. It's always, how much money am I making, and moving on.
All right, got a question here from another Jerry. Does the 9% average, oops, sorry, hold on. Does the 9% average front gross include packs?
Yes, I believe that dealer does pack their vehicles. But actually, I've seen dealers that actually don't pack vehicles at all. I think the pack is misleading in your gross calculation, and I think really, honestly, you have to look at the dealer himself to say, what are the if I'm making a $2,000 gross profit flat out, does it really matter if it's pack or no pack? So I do think that some dealers are limiting themselves by packing every vehicle, and they're potentially losing profit in the long run by doing so. So I do think, again, goes back to the game plan. If you look at if you're making money on this vehicle, it doesn't really matter in what aspect you're making the money. If the retail price is right and you're buying it properly and you're putting the right investment into it, then there's no reason to pack it at all.
All right, question here from Vernon. How do I get this information on my Mannheim searches?
So again, it depends what tools you're leveraging. For example, Stockwave does bring in Mannheim as well as other inventory sources that you can apply this information on it. But if you go to a regular website or an auction house website by itself without leveraging technology, you will not be able to do that.
Okay, question here from Nick. If there will be less 3-year or older used cars in the market in the future, won't that just drive the price of those cars up, which then would cut the profits as well?
So that's a great question, but Nick, I do believe, as I mentioned earlier, is that if there's all depends on supply and demand, I believe that consumers are looking for these vehicles, but they're settling for other vehicles that there are available in the market. So in reality, if you are savvy enough to expand your search and pick up these vehicles that are sleepers potentially, that these other dealers are not buying, you are potentially buying them cheaper than the market, bringing them back to your market and be able to make a really nice profit on this because nobody else has that same vehicle. So not necessarily you're going to spend more on buying it. Maybe you will, but you're going to spend more money on selling it because those vehicles don't exist in the market. So if you look at a scarcity or if you look at market day supply, you're actually going to make money on these vehicles easy.
All right, I'm going to go with one more question here, and that is, where can I find more 6 to 8-year-old vehicles? I would definitely like more inventory variety.
That's a great question, and I think that goes back to leveraging the technology to help you find those vehicles. Unfortunately, there's not one location, there's not one state that is like the gem or the land that time forgot kind of thing. They're everywhere. It's just a matter of how efficient are you in finding those vehicles and how efficient are you leveraging tools out there to help you identify those vehicles when they come available in the market.
All right. Well, Majd, I think that's all we have time for in terms of our live questions, but did you want to leave folks with any final comments?
I do. I just I do want to appreciate everyone taking the time out again to come and listen to the webinar today. I hope it was helpful, and I do look forward to. I will be available. I will be attending the NADA coming up in January. So seek me out or send me an email. And I would love to meet with you if you're going to be there and spend more time on one-on-one. I wish everybody the best of luck and good luck in ending 2016 on a high note.
All right. And folks, before we do sign off, another thanks to each one of you for joining, and trust that you found today to be of value. Special thanks to Majd Saboura as well, to our sponsor for today, Viato. And again, thanks for joining us. This is Lori Dearman saying have a great rest of the week. Bye for now.